Imagine being such a moron that you made your entire career about lying about surviving one of Jigsaw's traps. That's how this fraudster, Bobby here, decided to make a quick buck, but he should have been careful for what he wished for, because now he's going to have to pay the price by completing a deadly series of challenges for real. And these traps are some of the most downright brutal monstrosities that we've ever seen in the history of the series. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat every death trap in Saw 7. This clout-chasing writer is about to learn one hell of a lesson. Everything begins with a one-footed man dragging himself along the floor of some dingy basement. As he comes around the corner, he's revealed to be none other than our old pal, Dr. Gordon. And he's losing a lot of blood, but thinking quickly, he manages to cauterize the stump on a hot metal pipe, living to fight another day. Before we find out what happens to him, first we have to stop at the middle of a park on a beautiful sunny day. In the middle of a big glass display, these two guys, Brad and Ryan, wake up on opposite sides of a terrifying contraption. Their hands are chained in place, and in front of them are two massive circular saw blades. But they won't be playing this game alone. Suspended in the air above them is this woman Dina, who turns out to be both of their girlfriends? And that's when Billy the Puppet comes in on his tricycle like the host of a bad dating show. As the two men shout for help, he explains that they're going to be given a choice. Once the timer starts, they'll have only 1 minute to either push the saws into each other or sacrifice their so-called girlfriend, who was really just using them both. With 60 seconds left on the clock, Dina here starts egging them both on to kill each other. And it almost works, as Brad takes a nasty wound to the chest. But that's only until the bros eventually realize what she's doing and decide that they're both ready to be single. Releasing their grips, they bring the saw back to the middle just as the girl gets lowered down, and she's brutally sliced in half a few inches at a time in front of an entire crowd of horrified civilians. Okay, I've heard of a messy breakup, but that was just uncalled for. Now, just like any Jigsaw trap, the key to survival here is looking past the terrifying machinery and understanding the true threat. And this one actually has an easy solution, at least for the two guys anyway. Their situation reminds me of an ethical dilemma called the trolley problem, which, if you aren't familiar with, says that a speeding train is headed towards 5 people tied to the tracks. You know the one. You're standing next to a lever that could send the train down another set of tracks where only one person is tied up, but should you? Pulling the lever means saving 5 people, but you're actively causing the other person's death. For the guys, they can either push the saw and cause the death of someone else, or do nothing and leave the blood on Jigsaw's hands. When you look at it from that perspective, I'd say that they made the best choice. But there is a secret third option, and that's trying to cheat the game and save all 3 of them. For that, let's start inside the trap and work our way out. Dinah here can't do anything, but from a certain angle, it looks like it might be possible for one of the guys to maneuver their body in just the right way, and use the saw to cut the chain that's attached to their hips. Then they can step out of the way of the saw, allowing them to push it all the way over to one side without killing anyone. Their only other hope is if the bystanders figure out a way to set them free. And when this lady is the only one making an attempt, you might as well just start planning your funeral. If they're lucky, those windows are made of tempered glass like you'd find on common storefronts. It is stronger than regular glass, but can still be shattered with a force of about 100 megapascals. All you need is something to break it with, and this park is filled with skateboards, rocks, and construction tools that are perfect for the job. But knowing Jigsaw, we can't rule out that he's using multi-layered glass polycarbonate, otherwise known as bulletproof glass, designed to withstand extreme impacts. They'd need something like a high-powered drill to get through, and even then, it would still take too long to save their lives.
This drill is a piece of shit.
If that's the case, then their last chance is to look for the door or hatch that was used to access the room and hope that getting past the lock is easier than breaking the glass. Have you ever felt a strange presence in your own home? That unsettling feeling that something just isn't right? If you've been seriously injured in an accident, that feeling of unease might be more than just a ghost in the machine. Insurance companies often try to spook you into accepting lowball offers. They might make the claims process seem complicated and mysterious, hoping that you'll give up. But you don't have to navigate this legal labyrinth alone. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm, with a team of experts who can fight for the compensation you deserve if you become their client. They have a proven track record of success, achieving significant verdicts for victims of accidents. $12 million in Florida, 34 times the highest insurance offer. $26 million in Philadelphia, 40 times the highest insurance offer. And the best part, the fee is absolutely free unless you win. Don't let the insurance companies bully you into accepting less than you deserve. Morgan & Morgan will fight to get you the justice you deserve if you become their client. Fighting big companies takes a big law firm. As America's largest injury law firm, they're ready to take on insurance companies of every size. If you are in an accident or are injured in any way, you should know how to protect your rights. Don't overthink it. Take action to protect your rights, and Morgan & Morgan will fight to get the compensation you deserve if you become their client. Morgan & Morgan has modernized the injury law process, so if you want to work with them, you can submit a claim and communicate with your legal team all from your smartphone. You can check out forthepeople.com/beat or scan the QR code on your screen to learn more. Remember, you're not alone in this. If you ever get seriously injured, your case could be worth millions, and you're only a few clicks away from potentially changing your life. It's so easy. You can start your claim now with Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com. And now, back to the show. Now it's time to catch up with two more of our old friends, Jigsaw's ex-wife Jill and her arch-nemesis, Detective Hoffman. After witnessing Hoffman survive the reverse bear trap at the end of their last encounter, she managed to hide while he escaped and stitched himself up in an abandoned building. But she knows that it's only a matter of time before he comes back for revenge. Fearing his eventual return, she goes down to the police department and meets with sunflower seed enthusiast Officer Matt Gibson from Internal Affairs. She's ready to spill the beans on Hoffman's connection with the Jigsaw killings, giving them all the details that they'll need to crack the case. But before she tells them anything else, she wants their full protection. And believe me, she's gonna need it. First though, Hoffman has some unfinished business with somebody else, and after disposing of some evidence, he sets his sights on Bobby Dagan, a motivational author who's hiding a dark secret. During an appearance on a talk show, Bobby tells his story about surviving one of Jigsaw's traps by pulling himself up to a platform using chains that were hooked into his chest. In the end, he says that the experience gave him a whole new perspective on life, and makes sure to plug his book, Survive, now on sale at a store near you. But his team of publicists gets annoyed when he doesn't end the interview by smooching his wife like they planned. Meanwhile, at the police station, Jill walks outside only to find her path blocked by an all-too-familiar tricycle. And before she can even react, someone pokes her in the neck with a dose of the sleepy juice. When she finally wakes up, she finds herself chained at the end of a long set of tracks, where Hoffman is just firing up some kind of BattleBot bobsled of death, saying that his only regret is not being able to kill her twice. He Beyblade lets it rip and sends that thing hurtling down the tracks straight towards her, where it absolutely obliterates the helpless Jill by tearing her body into pieces with a metal spike. But lucky for her, she wakes up in a bed moments later, realizing that it was all just a dream. But if you think that was cheap, then don't worry, because this next trap is 100% real, and it might just be the most insane one yet. Waking up in an abandoned garage, we find this dude Evan here, who you might recognize as the lead singer of Optimus Prime's favorite band. Speaking of Autobots, his entire back is glued to the driver's seat of a junked out muscle car, and that's when Jigsaw's instructions start to play. A message recorded on an old cassette tape tells him that he and 3 of his racist friends are about to be punished for their crimes, and only he has the power to save their lives. He'll have 30 seconds to pull himself free and grab the lever. Otherwise, the supports underneath the car will give out, setting off a gruesome chain of events that leads with them all dead. Desperate, he starts struggling as hard as he can as the timer begins counting down, tearing himself free one disgusting chunk of flesh at a time. But it's no use, and just when he's about to reach the lever, the timer hits 0. All of a sudden, the jack stands drop out as the spinning tires crush his girlfriend's skull, peeling out across her body as the car gains traction and speeds across the garage. In the process, this dude's arm and chin are pulled right off of his body, and Evan plows straight through the garage door, pancaking his third friend before crashing full speed into another parked car, and finally killing Evan as he goes sailing straight through the windshield. Okay, wow. Holy shit, right? I think the only thing that me and this guy have in common is that both of our jaws are on the floor. Knowing it was Hoffman who set this trap up means that it was most likely never meant to be beaten. But with that being said, there were a few opportunities that Evan missed here that possibly could have saved their lives. To start off with the obvious, he wasted a lot of time after waking up before he even started trying to get free. Once the countdown started, he only had 30 seconds to finish the challenge, but a full minute and a half went by before that, where he could have been working on his escape, giving him 4 times as much time to figure it out. Another thing he failed to notice was that the keys were still in the ignition. To be fair, we know Jigsaw would have never missed something like that, but remember, it was Hoffman who built the trap. Maybe he was in a hurry and made a critical mistake, so as silly as it would be if it worked, the first thing that I would do is try to just take the keys out. His friends were all restrained in a way that made it impossible for them to go anywhere, so their only chance was for Evan to reach the lever. The problem is that beating the trap according to the rules was basically impossible. Evan here was attached to the seat by the back of both of his arms down to his elbows and his entire back from his shoulders to his hip. The area that he had to pull off was equal to roughly 30% of all the skin on his entire body, and since your skin is actually your body's largest organ, it's full of millions of nerve endings that would cause him excruciating pain if he tried to pull free. Makes sense, right? The only way that he could possibly have done it was by grabbing the steering wheel with both hands and using all of his strength to pull himself free in one motion, like tearing off the world's most painful band-aid. But even then, the massive blood loss would cause him to die in a matter of minutes without medical attention. Now, if Evan had used his time better after first waking up, there is one other strategy that he could have tried. What he should have done was use his fist to break off a piece of the glass and then use the glass to cut the seatbelt into a long strip. Using the seatbelt, he could form a loop and throw it around the lever, using it to pull the handle before time ran out. As part of his PR scheme, Bobby attends a support group with a bunch of other Jigsaw survivors, where one woman tells a story about how she was forced to knock her abusive husband into a pit of upside-down lawnmowers, spraying his blood all over a bunch of cute little garden gnomes. For her, Kramer's radical self-help program turned out to be a success, leaving her with a newfound reappreciation for life. But another survivor, Simone, sees things a bit differently. She cut off her own arm to defeat her opponent, Eddie, during a trap back in Saw 6. Simone here isn't too happy about the most traumatic experience of their lives being used to sell a book, but sell it he does, as old Bobby Boy gets up and gives yet another inspirational speech about overcoming 4 years, this time flashing his muscles and smooching his wife. Well, someone likes it so much that they decide to give him a standing ovation, and it turns out to be none other than our pal Doc Gordon, who extends an extremely ironic-sounding thank you before making his way out of the room. Confused, his best friend and manager Kale asks him about the guy after the meeting, but Bobby reassures him that the doctor is harmless. In fact, he's so confident that he decides to just walk to his car all alone, and that, my friends, was his biggest mistake. As he reaches the car, he's surprised to notice that his wife seems to be missing when all of a sudden a pig-masked attacker grabs him from behind and knocks the man unconscious. Back at the precinct, Gibson gets a call from his partner, Rogers, about the new trap that they just found at the garage, and quickly rushes over there to check it out. It's not his first time dealing with a Jigsaw case, but something about this one feels different, and while he's trying to figure out what it is, his partner finds something even more concerning in the bathroom. Lying there on the floor is Hoffman's reverse bear trap, and there's a message written on the mirror that reads, "Gibson, see for yourself." As for Bobby, he eventually wakes up and finds himself trapped in a big cylindrical cage, with the title of his book, Survive, spelled out on the bottom. He immediately starts trying to kick himself free, but that's when a TV in the corner of the room starts playing his message, and it turns out that he's been a giant fraud this whole time. On the tape, Jigsaw calls him out for lying about escaping his trap. But tonight, it's finally time for his dreams to come true. Cutting to security footage, the man sees that his wife Joyce has also been taken prisoner, and he only has 1 hour to save her life while completing a series of brutal challenges along the way. With that, the lights come on as Bobby is suddenly hoisted into the air, dangling him above a floor covered with sharp metal spikes. Reaching above his head, he grabs onto a mystery handle and gives it a good pull, only for the floor of the cage to drop right out and leave him hanging on by the tips of his fingers. One wrong move and he'll be Swiss cheese, but readjusting his grip, he holds on and starts swinging the entire cage back and forth until he's built up enough momentum to clear the spikes, launching himself through the air and landing safely on the concrete floor. Okay, let's get this one thing out of the way first. This dude totally deserves to be here. He might have survived the first challenge, but Bobby, my man, you sir have seriously up to go around claiming to be a survivor when the guy was still alive? And write a book about the whole fake experience, basically making a mockery of his entire message, all just to turn a profit? And because of that, I don't feel bad for you here at all. Good luck making it out alive, because Bobby, you f***ed up. Now with that being said, he might be full of shit, but Bobby actually came in clutch here. I'm just as surprised as you are. The one mistake that he did make was pulling the handle before he was ready. If there's one thing that we know by now, it's that when it comes to Jigsaw traps, you always want to take a look around and observe things as much as possible before starting the challenge if you can. It's a good thing he's been practicing his kung fu grip, otherwise he would have been turned into a shish kebab. After the floor of his cage fell out, he was left dangling from the ceiling at the end of the roughly 16-foot-long chain, turning him into sort of a human pendulum. In a pendulum, the weight, which is literally called the bob, is suspended from a point called the pivot. While still hanging, Bobby was being pulled directly downwards toward the floor by the force of gravity. As he started swinging, he added kinetic energy moving from side to side, gradually increasing the amplitude or distance of his swing. Using this method, a man of Bobby's size could launch himself as far as 14 feet, giving him more than enough clearance to get over the spikes. So, once he built up enough momentum, he released the cage at the peak of his swing, allowing him to jump to safety. The bad news is that this was just the first challenge, and he still has a long way to go before he's free. While he's lying there on the floor, Bobby takes a moment to reflect on how he ended up in this troubling situation. The truth is that while he and Kale were munching peanuts at the local dive bar, they saw a TV interview of one of Jigsaw's real victims and said to themselves, you know what, this looks like a great opportunity to make a few bucks. And after a trip down memory lane, it's back to Bobby's house of horrors for the next part of his challenge, and with no time to waste, he follows a red line on the floor even deeper into the maze. Somewhere else in the city, Gibson sets up Jill in a safe house, saying how he doesn't trust her after finding the woman's fingerprints all over the bear trap. She's worried for her safety, but he's convinced that there's nothing to be afraid of. Until exactly 5 seconds later, when a package from Hoffman shows up at the front door. At the same time, Roger calls him about a small explosion at the garage, only for an even bigger explosion to immediately go off. And it's clear that there's more to this case than any of them bargained for. Playing the disc, it's a message from Hoffman straight to Gibson himself, and he wants to make a deal. Hand over Jill and the killings stop, or keep protecting her, and the game goes on. Bobby makes his way through the building until he comes to a door with the message, redefine your priorities, noticing his every move is being watched by security cameras. Inside, the lights snap on to reveal a woman in a straitjacket with her body strapped to a chair, and a sinister looking string running straight down into her her mouth. It's his publicist, Nina, and she's here to help us with Bobby's first real challenge. The tape explains that the theme for this trap is Speak No Evil, and when the timer starts, he'll have 1 minute to find the key. You want to know where that key is? It's attached to a fishing hook all the way down in Nina's stomach. And oh yeah, every noise they make accelerates the timer. Isn't that a fun little twist? Getting the key will set Nina free, but if the timer runs out, then these 4 metal spikes are gonna pierce straight through her neck. And now that they know the rules, it's time for the game to begin. Nina here immediately starts screaming at the top of her lungs as soon as the game starts, but Bobby quickly quiets her down, reminding her that they can't make too much noise. Of course, that only lasts until he starts pulling on the string, because it's kinda hard to keep quiet when a rusty metal hook is coming back up your esophagus. Using both hands to pull with all of his strength, he keeps yanking on that forbidden dental floss, finally getting it out and dropping her tonsils straight on her face. But by then, it's already too late. And before he can unlock the device, the countdown reaches 0, killing her off as the 4 spikes close around her neck. Okay, it looks like Jigsaw here is making him complete a series of challenges to save his employees. Now, he could keep trying to save them, but think about this. Bobby's ultimate goal is to save his wife, and every second that he wastes on another challenge just puts her at greater risk. So instead, he could go for the extreme negative karma option and start speedrunning these people to their deaths as fast as he can. Like for Nina here, he could just start yelling really loud as soon as the timer starts, causing him to fail the challenge. She dies, the door opens to the next room, and he moves on to save his wife with several extra minutes still in the bank. It's not pretty, but sometimes the only way to outsmart an insane mastermind like Jigsaw is to make decisions so stupidly brutal that even he couldn't even expect it. But alright, fine, maybe he wants to save her. Well, good luck, buddy, because like the junkyard, this is another one that's borderline impossible. For the key to get into Bobby's hand, he had to pull that hook through almost 1.5 feet of extremely delicate tissue, full of vital arteries, thousands of pain receptors, and with literal doors made of muscle blocking the paths at certain points. On top of all that, they could only make noises as loud as a whisper, or a maximum of 20 to 30 decibels. Now, in order for the trap to work, it uses these 4 microphones to pick up sound. We could try looking for a sharp object somewhere in the room and using it to cut the cables connecting the microphones. The problem is, we only have 60 seconds to get this done. Attacking the padlock itself could work, but it would have to be a good shot, because too much noise fails the challenge. So if that doesn't work, then the last thing that I would try is knocking Nina here out cold. Then we can pull the key out without her making too much noise or feeling the pain. It may not be the most civilized approach, but I'm sure she'd thank him later if it means they both get to survive. After shouting some of his frustrations out, Bobby carefully follows the path through the next door, where he's surprised to find an autographed copy of his book sitting there on a desk. What's even more surprising is who it's signed for. Death Game GOAT John motherfucking Kramer himself. And that's when Bobby realizes that they actually have met before. At one of his many book signings, John pulled up in person to slickly let this dude know that he was onto him. But at the time, he had no idea that he was sitting face to face with the actual Jigsaw. While he's on his way to the next challenge, Gibson recognizes a Stone Angel statue in the background of Hoffman's latest tape. His partner, Officer Palmer, calls him over to check out some footage of an abduction downtown, saying how the author Bobby Dagan was the victim, and not only that, but his wife and the entire PR team are missing as well, meaning that they've just found out who's playing the game. Arriving at the next door, Bobby enters the room and finds another member of his team in a deadly situation. This time it's his lawyer Suzanne, and she's strapped down to a plate in the middle of a big metal wheel. All of a sudden, Billy here just fucking yeets himself through a window, since tape players just aren't dramatic enough anymore. And he's here to tell us the rules for challenge number 3. As his lawyer, Suzanne here turned a blind eye to all of his lies as long as her paycheck kept rolling in. But now she won't be seeing much at all when the platform spins and sticks her face first into 3 rusty spikes. To save her, he has to channel his inner powerlifter and hold up a heavy weight for 30 seconds. Seems easy enough, right? Until he realizes that it also stabs him right in the kidneys. The timer counting down, Bobby fights through the pain and keeps the machine from moving for as long as he can. Eventually, it's just too much, and he falls back, unable to endure it any longer. Trying again, he manages to stop it a few more times, but with only a matter of seconds left before it's over. The last of his strength finally gives out, and the machine pushes the woman forward into the spikes. Okay, I guess that's what you call taking a turn for the worse. Poor Suzanne's over here looking like someone tried to plug an extension cord into her face. And the worst part is that this might be the easiest challenge that we've seen so far. Instead of having to perform a difficult task and beat the clock, he only had to hold the machine for 30 seconds to win. So Bobby easily could have pulled this off if he just used a better strategy. Now the most important threat in this situation actually wasn't the trap itself. It was the 4 spikes that stabbed Bobby in the sides whenever he tried to lift the bar. So if it were me, the first thing that I would do is start looking for anything in the room that I could use as a tool to get around this. One thing the author didn't notice was the rack of old gym shoes right behind him. Each shoe has a rubber sole that's between 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick and can withstand between 15 to 20 newtons per square centimeter of force before they're punctured. With the force of the spikes concentrated into a single small point, 1 layer of rubber is not going to be enough, but stacking several layers on top of each other would allow the rubber to deform and spread out the force over an even larger area. Knowing this, I'd quickly put 1 pair of shoes over the spikes themselves and then use the laces to tie as many pairs as I could around my sides like armor. By adding just a few layers, he could have made the pain tolerable enough to hold up the bar and save the woman's life. Another option is to look for something that he can use as a handle, like that entire stack of hula hoops on the wall or some sturdy resistance bands. Then, instead of stepping into the machine, he can wrap them around the bar, climb on top of the cage, and pull up, lifting the weights without ever having to deal with those spikes at all. Those are just a few possibilities that Bobby could have tried instead, but he got so focused on the danger that he panicked and missed his chance. And that's something that he's going to need to change, because the next challenges are the worst ones yet. The investigation comes back around to Jill, who's been put in a cell at the station after the safe house did not work out. Gibson wants to know if she or her husband ever had any encounters with their missing author, but Jill claims that she's never seen the man before, meaning that they'll have to look somewhere else. In the meantime, they've just received another message from Hoffman instructing them to look beyond the crossroad to clear the town. Whatever this means, at least Gibson here already seems to know what he's talking about, and the two of them race over to where the officer thinks that he's hiding. Bobby's next stop brings him to the end of a long, dark hallway, and as soon as he steps inside, Bobby instantly slams the door shut behind them. When the lights come on, he realizes that most of the hallway's floor is missing, and there's nothing but a deadly drop down to the basement below. All the way at the other side is his best friend Kale, with a metal blindfold strapped to his face. The man immediately begins to panic as Bobby reaches for the tape, listening as Jigsaw explains the rules for the challenge. Since Kale here always does whatever his friend tells him, he'll have to listen very carefully while the author helps him navigate across the planks using nothing but his words. At the same time, Bobby has to reach the key on his end of the hall, and if they don't make it in time, then his best friend has to pay the price. The boys start off their blindfolded parkour challenge with Bobby shimmying along the wall, shouting directions at Kale as he carefully maneuvers across the planks. It's going surprisingly well at first, but the path gets more treacherous with every step that they both take, until all of a sudden one of the boards snaps, sending Kale plummeting towards his death. Luckily, he's able to hold on for dear life, and Bobby absolutely sends it across a giant gap as he realizes that they're both running short on time. Reaching for the key, he manages to grab it just as Kale gets back to his feet, but there are only 9 seconds left, and his only choice is to throw the key straight into his friend's hands. Telling him to get ready, he flings it over only for it to bounce straight off the backboard, falling right through the man's fingertips just as the timer reaches 0. And realizing that he's he's suddenly hoisted into the air by a steel cable, choking him as he swings above the open pit. Okay, it's never been easy seeing two best friends get pulled in opposite directions. Bobby here didn't exactly do his buddy any favors either. I mean, sure, Cale couldn't move until he started the timer, but he had all that time to look around the area, and once you see the key dangling there, your plan should be to start moving towards it the second you hit the tape. This would have given him a full extra minute before the timer started, while Jigsaw was still explaining the rules, giving them twice as long to complete the challenge, so that he could focus only on giving Cale directions across. Now, when it comes to those directions, that's where Bobby screwed him over yet again, because he led him straight into a trap when all he had to do was take one look at the path to see it coming. When he reached the second ledge, Cale had a choice between two paths. The one on the left was a lot shorter, making it look like it would save them time, but all you need is a basic understanding of physics to see why this was dangerous. When Cale stands over the gap, he's being pulled straight down by the force of gravity, applying that force directly to the board. In physics, this is called stress. The average US man weighs about 200 pounds, and typically wood like pine kind of has a bending strength of around 7,500 psi. But the amount of stress caused by Cale standing on it changes depending on how much material there is to spread out the weight. All of these boards are the same length and thickness, so the only variable is how wide they are. To safely hold his weight, we want the board to be at least 1 foot wide, and when you look at the board that Bobby steered him towards, you can tell that it's clearly not wide enough to support him. If Bobby here were paying attention, then they could have avoided this obvious trap, saving them a lot of time and possibly saving Cale's life. Back on the streets, Gibson and his partner break into the abandoned building where Hoffman recorded his tapes. It's the same spot alright, but there's no sign of him here, and that's when Rogers asks how he knew where to go. The truth is that when Gibson was just a rookie, he got jumped by a bottle-wielding bum while searching at this very same spot. He got his old ass kicked so badly that it was almost lights out until a younger detective Hoffman came along and saved his life. But even though the man surrendered, Hoffman shot him 3 times in cold blood. Gibson reported him for unnecessary brutality, but they just ended up giving Hoffman a promotion, which is how he started working for Internal Affairs. The two of them have been in a feud ever since, and the detective always promised that one day he was gonna make Officer Gibson here regret that decision, and the attacker who Hoffman shot was a patient at the Clear Dawn Psychiatric Hospital, which was shut down many years ago and stayed abandoned ever since. Gibson rushes over to investigate the hospital, telling his partner to keep an eye on Jill until he gets back. In the maze, Bobby has less than 20 minutes left when he makes it to the next challenge. Before it begins, he and his wife get a quick chance to talk through the cameras, but their reunion is rudely interrupted when the channel switches over to the Jigsaw show. For this one, he has to figure out a 4-digit code to unlock the door, but as always, there's a twist. The numbers are hidden underneath his wisdom teeth, so he'll have to play dentist and yank those bad boys out all by himself. And every second that he wastes means that he's one step closer to being single. A diagram on the wall shows him which teeth to pull, so after telling his wife not to look, he picks up the pliers and starts painfully getting to work. At the same moment, a squad of officers led by Gibson break into the room where it all started, and the obvious torture dungeon vibes let them know that they're in the right place. They start clearing the building one room at a time, all while Bobby is still pulling out those pearly whites, discovering one gruesome crime scene after another with every door that they open. Finally, he manages to get one tooth out just as they find his publicist looking like she has a sore throat. While he's buckling down for round 2, Gibson gets a call from his partner back at the station saying how she traced the last message back to the same garage where they found the demolition derby trap. It turns out that Hoffman was right under their noses all along, and not wanting to lose him, the officer takes off to investigate. Bobby decides that it's time to kick things up a notch and starts using the wall to just slam the last tooth right out of his mouth. The officers are getting close enough that they can hear his shrieks of pain, but after a few good hits, he's finally able to get it out, enter the code, and pass through the door into the final chamber. Okay, and I thought Jigsaw was supposed to be a bad guy, but it looks like all he did here was save Bobby a trip to the dentist. Now, to be fair, that looked painful as hell, but it also seemed pretty easy, right? I mean, pulling out 2 of your teeth doesn't sound scary at all when you think of all the other traps that we've seen. But taking this for granted would be a huge mistake. Just like before, the point of this challenge wasn't to kill Bobby, it was just another way to waste his time before getting to the grand finale. And that's exactly what ended up happening. Even though he technically completed the challenge, he entered this room with 20 minutes and left with less than 5. And if you ask me, that's just bad time management. Your wisdom teeth are some of the strongest teeth in your mouth, with thick roots that firmly anchor them straight into your jawbone. They're also covered in thick enamel, the hardest substance in the human body, so they can withstand the significant pressure that comes from chewing food. If you're trying to get them out as quickly as possible, then the key comes down to your technique. He should have used the extractors to grip the tooth as close to the gum line as possible, and then instead of pulling straight out, moved it in a rocking motion back and forth, making it easier to break the periodontal ligament, which holds the tooth in its socket. Using the wall was a good idea, but instead of blindly slamming against it, a better strategy would have been to wedge the pliers against another solid object to create a stable point of leverage, allowing him to twist the tooth out with better precision. Gibson rushes to the garage where he makes a shocking discovery. Smashing through the mirror, he realizes that it was actually a window all along, and behind it there's an entire secret-ass room. Making his way inside, he finds a body that he thinks is Hoffman sitting in a chair, but when he runs up to slap the cuffs on him, it turns out that it's just our buddy the Jawbreaker standing in as a decoy. It looks like Hoffman is still one step ahead, and since they haven't caught up with him yet, Bobby still has to face his 6th and final challenge. Finally, he makes it up to a large boiler room where he finds his wife chained up on a platform, but she's surrounded by an electric fence, giving him a literal shock when he tries to get close. Now it's time for our host Jigsaw to tell us the rules of the game. And this is one that Bobby should be very familiar with, because just like in his book, he has to put 2 big-ass meat hooks straight through his pecs and use the chains to pull himself up all the way to an extension cord hanging dozens of feet above the ground, connecting the cable before the timer runs out to save his wife. As Gibson looks around the room, he suddenly realizes that Hoffman has been watching them the whole time. This psycho actually used the explosion as a distraction while he replaced one of the dead bodies, which means while they've been looking for him, he's already made his way into the station itself. All of a sudden, a Walter White automated machine gun pops up from the corner and starts blasting every square inch of the room, taking out Gibson and the others before they even know what hit them. At the station, the coroner opens up a body bag, only for Hoffman to pop out there like he's the Undertaker and stab him right in the neck. Seeing another officer coming, he quickly hides behind the door and hits this guy with a stab to the neck too. But he's not even close to being done yet. A little neck stab for this guy in the suit gets him to Palmer's office, but he decides to shake things up by going with a neck snap this time instead. Without even skipping a beat, this absolute legend uses Palmer's dead body to weekend at Bernie's his way through the next door, slaying the guard and finally taking out Rogers with a bullet straight through the eye. And now there's no one left between Hoffman and his biggest op, Jill. Screaming for help, the woman quickly grabs a sharp object, stabbing him in the neck when he gets close and using the opportunity to escape. But Hoffman easily tracks her down to a nearby office and just starts absolutely whooping her ass all over the room. Grabbing a chair, he quickly buckles her in so that she can't escape and goes over to an evidence shelf where he finds the most poetic tool for the job, Jigsaw's original reverse bear trap. Strapping it to her head, Jill wakes up just as the timer starts clicking down, and with no hope to escape, her life flashes before her eyes until eventually the trap activates, as it snaps her jaw open and sends blood, flesh, and teeth flying all over the room. Back in the maze, Bobby painfully forces the hooks through his muscles and begins pulling himself up one hand at a time. Taking both hands off the chains, he desperately tries bringing the 2 ends together, when all of a sudden his body gives out, tearing the hooks back through his flesh and sending him plummeting down to the floor. Getting to his feet, there's nothing that he can do but watch as a giant metal pig emerges from the platform, trapping his wife inside. Suddenly, a massive burst of flames surrounds the cage, and she's slowly cooked alive as the temperature inside brutally melts the flesh right off of her bones. As Bobby lies there in defeat, he leaves the station and sets fire to his workshop, thinking that he's almost home free. But that's when a squad of 3 pig-masked attackers sneak up and knock him out. Behind the mask is none other than Doc Gordon, who's already been secretly helping Jigsaw with his plans all along. His last assignment was to watch out for Jill and get revenge if anything happened to her. So after catching Hoffman, he brings him back to the bathroom where it all started, chaining him up and even taking away the hacksaw as he leaves him for dead. But if we know one thing about Hoffman here, it's that he never stays dead for very long. Saw 7, Saw 3D, Saw the final chapter. What a decent entry into the Saw franchise. And the boy, John Kramer's legacy, lives on for another time. Love a good death game around here, and let me know down in the comments if you guys would have done anything differently. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'm the Guy. I'll see you in the next video, and have a damn good day.